I mentioned looking at the evaluation files, and because we had both the principal files and the consulting teachers files, we were able to do some counting. And both in terms of how many formal and informal evaluations or observations were done, but also the accuracy or the depth of the documentation that both principals and consulting teachers were able to do. And these are just average counts, but there was a much larger range, and there's an error on this one. It's actually up to 490 pages on the evaluation, in the evaluation documentation by the consulting teachers. So some of these files were very large. That's why we had 6 boxes. And as we went through them, we were really impressed by just how rigorous these were. We've heard talk about, well, what does, we need to have better evaluation. Well, what we found here is this is better evaluation. And so Julie's going to talk about another sort of surprising finding that we had, but just to sort of wrap up about the consulting teachers, 3 points. First of all, the quality and the rigor of the evaluations that the consulting teachers do clearly surpasses anything that we typically see in teacher evaluation at the current time. Second, teacher peer review addresses a basic capacity problem that we have in the system that requires principals, typically, to do the evaluation, principals who have neither the time and often not the expertise to do the kind of quality evaluation that we're looking for. And finally, and I think most importantly, the teacher peer review programs that we looked at fundamentally changed the definition of evaluation, because it was not about gotcha. It was about support and about improvement, and about collecting evidence of that improvement. So I'll turn it over to Julie, who's going to talk a little bit about the governance panel.
I mean, these programs are governed by a panel composed of individuals appointed by the district and by the union. It is the union particularly. This is a labor management partnership, and importantly, these PAR programs are collaborative stakeholder decision-making in a context of cooperative labor management relations. So for this finding, what I think is key is that it's collaborative, and it involves a number of stakeholders, and that it is labor management relations. So the panel is composed of, the board is composed of union and district representatives, each appointed by its constituent organization. We were privileged to be able to observe a meeting each in Poway and San Juan of the governance board, and it was very interesting. If you walked into the room not knowing who the members of the panel were and just listened to the conversation, you wouldn't be able to tell the district representatives from the union representatives. These conversations were serious and sophisticated and deep and focused intensively on teaching and learning. The board listens to the reports and the evidence gathered by the consulting teachers on the teachers in PAR, both beginning teachers, in the case of Poway, and permanent struggling teachers in the case of both districts. They listen intently to these very detailed reports. As Dan suggests, the amount of accumulated evidence is pretty amazing. And they ask very penetrating questions. Did you try this? Have you offered the teacher this kind of support? What leads you to that conclusion? And so they make the reports, they make the CTs present very hard evidence in order to sustain a judgment, because it is this board that makes high-stakes recommendations to the superintendent and school board regarding teachers' continued employment. The recommendations that the panel makes to the superintendent and school board are indeed recommendations. The board doesn't have, the governance panel doesn't have the legal authority, certainly, to make decisions on employment. However, the recommendations that the governance panels make are almost always accepted by the superintendent and by the board. Interestingly, the same kind of standards of rigor apply to principals who appear before the governance board. We were witness to one principal who appeared before a governance board in one of the districts. He and the consulting teachers were not quite in accord about the results of help. The consulting teacher thought that the help had not done the trick for this particular teacher, and the principal wanted to keep the teacher. And so each of them appeared before the governance panel to make a case for their decisions. A consulting teacher made a very compelling report, went away, principal came in, made a rather short and breezy report, and the panel said to him essentially, not good enough, go back and do it again if you're serious about wanting this conclusion. Principal was pretty surprised. So the board holds everybody who appears before them to a quite high standard of rigor and of evidence and of a very complete explanations about what kind of support was provided.